Hey there crafter, it's Amanda. Welcome to this week's Tutorial Tuesday. So my dad has a collection of ornaments that were handmade for him by his grandmother and aunts, which makes those ladies my great-grandmother and my great-aunts. And every year when I look at them, I kind of think through, I wonder how they made this, or maybe they did this to make it. So this year I decided to sit down and figure out how they actually made these ornaments, and I'm going to show you how you too can DIY 5 of these old-timey retro ornaments. Also, I decided to split this video into 2 parts because it was getting a little long, so today is going to be a 2 for Tuesday. Now, I don't actually know the dates on a lot of these because some of them could be really old, some of them might not be that old. They're all at least 25 years old, but I'm pretty sure they're more like 40 or 50 years old. The good news is you don't need any complicated supplies for these. Most of the materials I had on hand, or else they're simple to get at a craft store. So let's start DIYing. The first DIY we're going to duplicate are these clothespin critters. So here we have a Santa and a reindeer. Now I don't have that style of clothespin, so I'm going to be using a clothespin with a spring, and we're going to make a little Santa and a snowman. So I'm going to start by painting my snowman white and my Santa red. A little tip is to use some kind of container. I'm just using a plastic one that I know this paint will come off of really easily, but you could also use the side of a cardboard box. And I'm just going to safety pin it to there so that way I can paint everywhere and not have to touch the wet paint. I've got my snowman clothespin painted white, and now I'm going to paint my Santa one red. Now that they're painted, I just have to let them dry. Now that my clothespins are dry, it's time to decorate them. For my Santa, I'm going to get a little bit of white paint and add a beard. And also, as a quick note, the clip part goes at the bottom and the part you squeeze goes at the top. That's that trim, and now we'll add the beard. I'm just moving my brush in a circular motion. While Santa's drying, we can work on our snowman. And I'm going to do most of the decorating on him with just Sharpies. So I'm going to give him an orange carrot nose, and 2 eyes, and a mouth. And then I'm going to add a scarf on with some fabric, but we'll give him some buttons further down. So to finish my snowman, I'm going to cut out a little strip of green fabric to make a scarf. And then I'm going to cut out some rectangles from this blue fabric to make a hat. Then to finish my Santa, I've got a pom-pom I'm going to glue on the side. And again, I'm just using the tacky glue for this. I'm also going to add some googly eyes. And fortunately, the tacky glue will dry clear. I'm also going to use a Sharpie to give Santa a belt, some boots. And let's also give Santa a little smile. So this is the retro one. This is an Amanda original. Obviously a little different because of the clothespin shapes, but I feel like they're a fun imitation, and I feel like they carry on the spirit of this DIY. Next, we're going to be duplicating these beaded star ornaments. Now this one I don't technically have one made by my great-grandmother or great-aunts, but I have seen other people's relatives make these. And again, it's just an older style ornament craft. So to make the star bead ornaments, we're going to need some thread, a needle, and 15 beads. As far as beads go, you're going to need 5 just round beads for the center. I'm using these little ones, but you could use larger sized beads. You'll also want 5 flat beads, 1 for each of your star points. For this, I'm using these tri-beads, but you could also use something like a button. And lastly, for the points of your stars, you'll want 5 round small beads. Now, I'm using the same size beads for the points of my star as I'm using for the center, because that's what I have available. We'll start by threading our needle, and then I'm going to leave my thread doubled up for this project. And I'll want about maybe a foot of doubled up length, just because it's easier to work with if you have more thread versus less. So I have this somewhat long piece here. I'm going to go to my 2 tail ends and tie it in a basic overhand knot a couple of times. It's also helpful to leave your tail a little bit long because we will use this tail at the very end to tie off. Now that I have a knot tied in the end, I'm going to take my first round bead for the center, string it onto my thread, and then I'm going to go to just before the knot and run my needle through the little loop. And then we'll pull it tight, and this will just cinch up on our first bead. Then I'm going to take my remaining 4 beads for the center and string these on. And then I'm going to run my needle back through all the beads in a loop, and I'm going to do several loops. I'm going to go through my first bead, my second bead, and I like to do just a couple at a time and then cinch it up. Go through the first 2 beads, let's go through the next 2. And as you work this, it's very important that you keep your tension as snug as possible, or else you'll end up with a saggy ornament. So I'm cinching it up. And I'll go through all 5 beads maybe twice. Once you've formed your center ring and it's nice and snug and not saggy and flopping over, it's time to add our first star point. First, I'm going to go up through my flat bead. So for me, that is this tri-bead. I'll slide that against the side of my star. And then I'm going to go through this round bead for the point. And then to fasten this point on, I'm going to go back down through my flat bead and through the next round bead in the center. And then I can pull it tight and it will set the little round bead at the point. Then I'm going to repeat the process. Go up through a tri-bead, through a round bead, and then once I've gone through the round bead, I'm going to go back down through my tri-bead and through the next round bead in the center of my star. Then make sure to pull it nice and snug. So what I like to do to make sure it's snug is I'll pull on this point because that'll cinch up that point. And then I'll pull on my tail end to cinch it all up. And then repeat. Go up through the tri-bead and a round bead, go back down through the tri-bead and then through a round bead of the center. And then all 5 star points will be added. Now at this point it may be a little bit floppy, kind of like mine is here. So I'm going to go along and I'm going to pull on my very first point to pull out the tension, then go to my next bead to pull the tension, next bead, next point, and kind of work that tension around so I can really cinch it up as snug as I'm able to. Once I've got it cinched up, I'm going to run through the center beads until I'm near my starting tail. So I'm going to run through these next 2 center beads. Again, making sure to keep everything as snug as I can. Put it right down here. And then I'm going to tie my 2 ends together. So that's the tail from the beginning and the end we've been using to stitch it all together. Once we've tied it off nice and secure, I'm just going to run my tails up through this point here, trim this tail, and then we need to run this tail up through there as well. But here is how the star bead ornament turns out. And to hang it up, you can just run a hook through one of the beads at the point. And here is how the beaded star ornaments turn out. These are so cute and they're so fun. And of course you can change the size of your beads to make them larger or smaller. Next up are these felt hand-sewn ornaments, and we have a bunch of these. We also have some little reindeer ones that are super cute. So let's make our own version of this project. So I'm going to make a little snowman. I'm going to be using this old pillowcase that I've been using as scrap fabric for some projects. And for me, it's already folded over, so it's already doubled up. I'm just gonna take a pencil and trace my design. Now when you draw your design, you wanna make everything bigger than you actually want it to be. Because we're going to stuff this and sew it, it will end up shrinking our design just a little bit when we do those steps. So I'm going to go a bit oversized here. And if you don't want to sketch out a design, you could print out a picture and then cut that out and use that as your template. Next, I'm going to cut this out. And since this side has my pencil marks, I will inside out everything and put the pencil mark sides to the inside. Now before I sew around the edges and then stuff it, I'm going to add my details to it. So we're going to add some buttons and we'll add a little scarf and hat. So before I sew my snowman together, I'm going to sew on a face, some eyes, a scarf, and some buttons. So I'm going to do the eyes and buttons using some beads and sequins. So for my first eye, I'm going to come up through my fabric and through a sequin, and then put a bead on there as well. And then I'm going to go back down through the sequin again and through the fabric. About like that, and I'll tie it on the back and repeat for my second eye. Up through the fabric, through a sequin, and through the bead. And then back down through the sequin. Now that I've sewn my pieces on, I will flip it over and tie it off on the back. Next, I'm going to cut out of my green fabric some scarf pieces and sew those on there. Fasten it on here, I'm just going to whip stitch around the edge. So I'm going to sew one more little piece of fabric to be like the tail of the scarf, and I'm also going to add a little hat in the same way. But just as a note, I'm not pulling my stitches super tightly because if you pull really tight, you'll bunch up your fabric. So I'm keeping them pretty loose. Now that my scarf is attached, I'm going to stack up my 2 pieces, and I'm going to stitch all the way around the edge. So at this point, I've sewn most of the way around my snowman, but I've left a little opening so I can stuff him. Also, I was going to add a hat, but I just really hate sewing by hand, so we're going to skip the hat. And to finish him up, I'm going to stuff him and then stitch the last little bit closed. And I've got a bunch of yarn scraps, so that's what I'm going to use to stuff my snowman. If you can't get your stuffing all the way to the head, you can also use a pencil to work the stuffing up there. Now that I've stuffed my project, I'm going to finish stitching around. Here is my finished little snowman, and I just ran a piece of yarn up to the top of his head so I can hang him on the tree. I gotta be honest, mine's a little scary, but that's kind of the nature of this craft, I feel like, but it's also super cute at the same time. And I don't know, I love this little snowman guy, it's great. And of course you can make a Santa or a little reindeer, whatever you want to make. I just went with a snowman because it was pretty simple. So those are the first 3 DIY retro ornament ideas. Be sure to check part 2 for the rest of the ideas. I hope y'all have fun making these. I know I had a lot of fun working on these, but I will see you in part 2. Happy crafting!